Welcome back to Stories of Slavery. Today's story carries us to Mississippi, 1871, where an unshakable mystery unfolded around a black girl folks began calling a witch. No one could make sense of what was happening in her presence. This story is heavy, rooted in cruelty, in fear, in the poison of racism. So, settle in, take a breath, and listen close. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know which city and country you're listening from. Your voice helps keep these histories breathing instead of buried. Let's begin. They found her kneeling at daybreak in the mud. Her hands were slick with blood, none of it her own. She was whispering words no white man had ever heard. The year was 1871. The place, Wilkinson County, Mississippi. And the girl they'd eventually brand a witch had barely turned 17. Her name was Abigail Collins. The Collins part came from somewhere already lost. Maybe the name of a former enslaver. Maybe something her mother chose when freedom finally arrived. It didn't matter much. Down in that corner of the world, black folks' names were written in dust. Quick to scatter, quick to be forgotten. But Abigail's name would linger. It would be feared, whispered in the dark when children fell sick and hope ran thin. The morning her power first surfaced, old Thomas Greaves was stretched out dying in a cabin built for slavery. Still standing 6 years after the war supposedly brought freedom. Dysentery had carved him hollow over 3 weeks. His wife had stopped crying 2 days earlier. She'd accepted what everyone already knew. Black folks didn't survive dysentery in Mississippi, not without a doctor. And doctors didn't come for black folks. But Abigail came. She materialized at the cabin door before sunrise, toting a cloth bundle that smelled like wet earth and something sharp, bitter. No one had sent for her. No one understood how she knew Thomas was slipping away. She was simply there, like she'd wandered straight out of the morning fog that clung heavy to the Mississippi lowlands. Thomas's wife recoiled when she saw the girl. Fear sharpened her voice as she tried to wave her off. The neighbors who'd gathered to mourn pressed themselves, flat against the walls, caught between the urge to flee and the need to witness whatever came next. Everyone knew about Abigail Collins. Everyone had heard the whispers, and everyone was terrified of what she stood for. Abigail paid no mind to their fear. She never did. She walked past them all, knelt down beside Thomas, and started working. Her hands moved with a certainty that seemed impossible for someone so young. She crushed leaves between her palms, mixed them with water from a clay jar she'd carried in, and tipped the mixture between Thomas's cracked lips. She pressed her fingers against his swollen stomach, hunting for something the others couldn't see. And then she began to speak. The words weren't English. No one gathered there could place them. Some later swore it sounded like the old tongue, the one their grandparents had carried from Africa in the bellies of ships. Others claimed it was something else entirely, something that made their skin crawl and their hearts hammer. The sound seemed to rise from somewhere deeper than her throat, filling that cramped cabin like a living presence. Thomas's wife crossed herself, whispering prayers that tangled with whatever Abigail was saying. The air in the room thickened, grew heavy, as though the atmosphere itself had turned solid. Candles sputtered, even though there was no draft. The temperature seemed to drop, despite the Mississippi heat pressing against the walls outside. For 20 minutes, Abigail worked in silence broken only by those strange utterances. Her fingers traced patterns across Thomas's chest, shapes that left no mark, yet seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. She placed heated stones wrapped in cloth along his sides, setting them with geometric exactness. She made him swallow 3 different mixtures, each one darker and more foul-smelling than the last. each one given with the authority of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and why. Then she stood, wiped her bloody palms on her dress, and walked out without a word. By noon, Thomas Greaves was sitting up, asking for food. By evening, he was on his feet. Within 3 days, he was back in the fields, weak but alive. The impossible had happened, and everyone knew who'd done it. That's when the whispers sharpened. That's when Abigail Collins became something more than just a girl. She became a problem that needed solving. Wilkinson County in 1871 was a place trapped between two worlds, neither of them kind. The war had ended 6 years earlier, but you wouldn't know it from looking around. The same white families who'd owned the plantations still ruled the land. The same black families who'd worked as slaves still toiled those same fields. Now as sharecroppers, buried under debt they'd never climb out of. Freedom had arrived with papers and promises, but the reality felt a lot like chains wearing different names. The county sat in the southwestern corner of Mississippi, where the soil was rich and black and perfect for cotton. Roughly 70% of the population was black, about 4,000 souls against 2,000 white residents. But power stayed fixed in white hands. Violence hung in the air like humidity, constant and suffocating. The Ku Klux Klan rode openly on Saturday nights, their white sheets visible from miles away. Black men vanished with sickening regularity. Black women were violated without consequence, their attackers shielded by laws that didn't recognize them as fully human. And black children learned early that survival meant making yourself small, quiet, invisible. Abigail Collins had never absorbed that lesson. She couldn't. It wasn't in her. She lived alone in a shack near the cypress swamps, about 2 miles from the nearest sharecropper settlement. The place was barely standing. Gaps in the walls let in wind and rain. The roof leaked in a dozen spots, and the dirt floor turned to mud whenever it stormed. But it was hers, and that counted for more than comfort. Her mother had died of fever when Abigail was 12, burning up in 3 days while no doctor came and no medicine helped. Her father had been sold off before she was born, back when selling humans was legal and called business instead of evil. She'd been raised partly by an old woman named Mama Zena, a root worker who'd kept the old healing ways alive through slavery and into this uncertain freedom. Mama Zena had been ancient even when Abigail was small. Her face was carved with wrinkles deep as riverbeds. Her hands were gnarled but sure. She'd survived 60 years in bondage, outlived 3 owners, and gathered knowledge that white doctors would have paid fortunes for. If their pride had let them learn from a black woman. Mama Zena passed when Abigail was 15, but not before teaching her everything. How to identify healing plants by touch in total darkness, running fingers along leaves and stems until the right one revealed itself. Which roots stopped bleeding and which ones stopped hearts. A distinction that could mean life or death depending on the moment. How to set bones so they healed straight, not crooked. How to break fevers that should have been fatal. How to brew teas that prevented pregnancy and tinctures that ended it. Knowledge that handed women power over their own bodies in a world determined to strip it away. She taught Abigail how to pray in the old way, calling on forces that had crossed the ocean in the minds of stolen people. Because power can't be chained even when bodies can. She showed her how to listen to the body's own language, how to sense what was wrong before seeing it, how to understand that healing wasn't just about herbs and prayers. It was about the bond between physical and spiritual, between individual and community, between past and present. Abigail absorbed it all, drank it in like the black earth drinks rain, and she added something of her own, something Mama Zena recognized but couldn't quite name. The girl had a gift that went beyond learning. She had an intuition that bordered on vision, an ability to know what was wrong with a body before touching it, to sense sickness in people before symptoms surfaced. She carried a presence that unsettled people even as they sought her help, an intensity in her dark eyes that suggested she saw more than what was visible. By 17, Abigail had been healing people for 2 years. Ever since Mama Zena's hands grew too shaky and her eyes too dim to work, she'd started in secret, only treating those who came to her shack after dark. People desperate enough to risk being seen visiting someone the community already feared. Word spread slowly at first, then faster as the impossible became undeniable. A child's fever broken in a single night, after 3 days of prayer, had done nothing. A man's infected wound healed without amputation when white doctors had already sharpened their saws. A woman's bleeding stopped when she should have bled out after childbirth. Her life saved by hands that knew exactly where to press and what herbs to use. Each miracle padded Abigail's reputation, and each miracle made her more dangerous in the eyes of those who needed black people to stay powerless. The white population of Wilkinson County had tolerated root workers before. Old slave women who knew herbs were useful, even necessary, when white doctors were scarce and expensive and often useless. But those women had been careful. They'd been humble. They'd acted grateful for the chance to serve. They'd bowed their heads and stepped aside, and never once challenged the natural order that kept them at the bottom of every heap. Abigail Collins knew none of that. She didn't bow her head when white people passed. She didn't step off the road to let them by. She looked them in the eye, which was its own form of revolution in Mississippi in 1871, and she carried knowledge that gave her power. Real power. The kind that couldn't be legislated away, or burned down, or beaten out of someone. The kind of power that threatened the very foundation of a society built on the lie of black inferiority. That made her intolerable. That made her a threat that needed eliminating. The first time Sheriff James Cutler heard about Abigail, he was sitting in the Woodville courthouse listening to Edmund Hartwell complain. Hartwell owned 3,000 acres of prime cotton land and the debt of 40 black families who worked it. He was 62, lean and tough as cypress wood, with cold blue eyes and a mouth that rarely curved into a smile. He'd been born into wealth, raised to believe his prosperity came from God, and the war had shaken his faith in nothing except the Yankees who'd won it. Hartwell laid out his problem with the careful precision of a man used to having his concerns taken seriously. There was a Negro girl practicing witchcraft. She was keeping workers alive who should have died from disease or injury. She was healing people so well that the black population was starting to see her as some kind of prophet or priestess. They were getting ideas. They were starting to think they didn't need white authority for everything. They were beginning to believe they had value beyond their labor. Sheriff Cutler understood immediately. He was 38, born in Wilkinson County, raised on stories about how good things were before Yankees and black freedom wrecked the natural order. He'd ridden with irregular Confederate forces during the war, which was a polite way of saying he'd terrorized Union sympathizers and murdered freed slaves who'd gotten too confident about their new status. He wore a badge now, but his methods hadn't changed much. Violence was still his main tool, just applied more selectively and wrapped in legal justification. Black people with hope were dangerous. Black people who believed they had power were more dangerous still. And a black girl who could demonstrate actual power, who could save lives when white authority said those lives were forfeit. That was the most dangerous thing of all. It cracked the foundation. It hinted that maybe white supremacy wasn't natural or inevitable. That maybe black people possessed abilities and knowledge that made them equal, or even superior, in certain areas. That hint, if allowed to spread, could unravel the whole social fabric. Cutler promised to handle it. That same evening, he rode out to Abigail's shack with 2 deputies. Men who'd also worn gray during the war and white sheets after it. They found the place easily enough. Smoke curled from the crude chimney. A small garden grew beside the shack, neat rows of plants none of them could name. Bundles of drying herbs hung from the porch roof, filling the air with unfamiliar scents. They dismounted 20 yards away, hands on their pistols. The door swung open before they could announce themselves. Abigail stepped out, and for a moment, all 3 men froze. She wasn't what they'd expected. The word, witch, had summoned images of something old and ugly, bent and frightening. More monster than human. But Abigail was young, with smooth dark skin that caught the last light of evening, and eyes that held no fear at all. She was tall for a girl, nearly 5'8", with her hair wrapped in a blue cloth. She wore a simple dress, patched but clean, and she regarded the 3 armed white men the way someone might regard stray dogs wandering into their yard. Cutler announced his purpose. They'd had complaints. Folks saying she was practicing medicine without a license, engaging in hoodoo and conjuring, stirring up trouble among the Negro population. That was illegal in Mississippi. She needed to come with them. Shut this operation down. Certain things weren't for black people to do. Abigail's response was simple and devastating. She told Cutler, no. Just that. No explanation, no apology, no attempt to negotiate. Just a flat refusal that hung in the air like a challenge no one had braced for. The confrontation escalated fast. Cutler drew his weapon, aimed it at her chest. His authority challenged in a way that made him feel small and angry. He announced her arrest. He threatened to shoot her where she stood if she resisted. He used every tool of intimidation he'd sharpened over years of keeping black people in line. And then Abigail did something that shifted everything. She looked at the gun, then back at Cutler's face, and spoke with quiet certainty about his son. She knew the boy was sick. She knew he'd been suffering for 2 weeks, with a fever that came and went. She knew Cutler's wife had been praying while Cutler tried to hide his fear. She described symptoms she shouldn't have known. Private details, medical information that was supposed to be secret. Then she gave her diagnosis. Malaria. The fever would keep returning, getting worse each time until it took the boy. Maybe a month from now. Maybe 2. But it would take him unless someone who knew what they were doing stepped in. The words hit Cutler like physical blows. His son was sick, had been for exactly 2 weeks, with exactly the symptoms she described. His wife Margaret had been beside herself. The doctor had said it was just a fever, nothing serious, but it kept coming back, and each time the boy seemed weaker. Cutler had been losing sleep, watching his son burn at night, feeling helpless in a way that terrified him. Abigail gave him a choice. He could arrest her tonight, drag her to jail, maybe hang her if he found a judge drunk enough to ignore basic law. But his boy would still die. Or he could leave her alone, let her do what she did, and maybe, she'd consider helping when he came begging. Which he would. They always did. For a long moment, nobody moved. The deputies stared at Cutler, waiting for orders. Cutler stared at Abigail, rage and fear battling in his eyes. Everything in him wanted to shoot her right there. To eliminate this threat to the natural order, to prove black people couldn't challenge white authority without consequences. But his son was dying. That was more real than pride, or racial hierarchy, or the rules he'd spent his life enforcing. He holstered his weapon and rode away, leaving Abigail standing on her porch, watching them vanish into the gathering dark. She'd won that round, but she knew it wouldn't be the last. Men like Cutler didn't forget humiliation, and white Mississippi didn't tolerate black people who refused to submit, especially not black women, especially not young ones who showed power that threatened the foundation of white supremacy. The next challenge came from a different direction, one that claimed moral authority instead of legal force. Reverend Samuel Marsh ran the Woodville Methodist Church, a white clapboard building that stood at the center of town like a moral compass pointing only one way. Marsh was 54, silver-haired. With a booming voice, he used to deliver sermons about God's natural order and the sin of racial mixing. He'd supported slavery from the pulpit, called it biblical and ordained. He'd opposed Reconstruction, called it satanic interference with divine will. And when he heard about a black girl claiming powers that seemed to rival divine intervention, he saw a theological threat that needed addressing from the pulpit. On Sunday, May 14, 1871, Reverend Marsh delivered a sermon specifically about Abigail, though he never used her name. He spoke about Exodus 7:11, where Pharaoh's magicians used secret arts to mimic Moses' miracles. He spoke about Acts 8, where Simon the sorcerer amazed people with magic before Peter rebuked him. He spoke about Deuteronomy 18:10, which forbade anyone who practiced divination or sorcery or interpreted omens. His voice filled the church, bouncing off wooden walls and settling into the hearts of people who wanted simple answers to complicated questions. "There is among us," he thundered, "practitioner of dark arts, one who claims powers of healing, who uses potions and incantations, who leads the colored population astray with false miracles that seem real but come from Satan himself. This is not medicine. This is not godly. This is witchcraft, plain and simple, and it must be stopped before it corrupts more souls." His congregation nodded and murmured in agreement. After the service, groups of men gathered outside, discussing what should be done. Some argued for legal action through proper channels. Others suggested more direct methods, the kind that happened at night with torches and ropes. All agreed that Abigail Collins represented a problem needing a solution before more black people started believing they could challenge white authority through any means, even healing. Word of the sermon reached Abigail through Marcus Webb, a young black man who worked as a stable hand in Woodville. He'd heard the sermon secondhand from his employer and rode out to warn her that same afternoon, his horse lathered with sweat from the hard ride. He stood nervous on her porch, glancing around as if Reverend Marsh might appear any moment. Abigail was grinding roots with a mortar and pestle, preparing medicine for a child with croup. She listened to Marcus's warning without stopping her work, her hands moving with steady rhythm. When he finished, she made a simple observation. Reverend Marsh could say what he wanted. She wasn't hurting anybody. She was helping people his God didn't care enough to help. People who died while Christians prayed over them with no effect at all. Marcus left, and Abigail continued her work. But something had shifted. The opposition to her was organizing, taking shape, becoming systematic. It wasn't just one angry sheriff or one frightened family anymore. It was becoming official, the kind of threat that ended with trees and ropes and crowds that called themselves righteous while committing murder. She knew what was coming. She'd always known, really. From the moment she'd started using Mama Zena's knowledge openly, she'd understood that power in black hands was intolerable to white Mississippi. The only question had been timing. How long before they moved from fear to action? How long before someone decided she needed to be eliminated? The answer came sooner than expected. That night, around midnight, Abigail heard footsteps outside. Multiple people trying to move quietly but failing, because fear makes people clumsy. She blew out her candle and moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. 6 men surrounded her shack, all wearing white sheets that glowed in the moonlight. Klansmen. They carried torches that threw dancing shadows and rifles that promised violence. One of them, bigger than the others, clearly the leader, stepped forward and shouted demands. Abigail Collins needed to come out. They knew what she was. They knew what she'd been doing. Time to answer for her witchcraft. Time to leave the county or face consequences that would make her regret every life she'd saved. Abigail had prepared for this possibility. Every root worker who lived long enough learned to prepare for violence. The shack had a back door that led directly into the swamp. A route she'd practiced running in darkness until she could do it blind. She had supplies hidden in 3 different spots in the swamp. Enough to survive weeks, if necessary. She had allies among the black community who would hide her if needed. Though helping her would put them at risk too. But she also had something else. Something she'd inherited from Mama Zena and refined through practice and necessity. A gift that went beyond herbs and prayers. An ability she didn't fully understand but had learned to trust. Something that happened when fear and belief and intention combined in ways that defied rational explanation. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, facing the masked men directly. Her courage in that moment was either magnificent or insane, depending on perspective. She stood there alone and unarmed, facing 6 men with weapons and murder in their hearts, and she showed no fear at all. The big Klansman seemed taken aback by her boldness. He repeated his demands. She needed to leave. Tonight, they'd give her one chance. She could run, or she could burn. Those were the only options they were offering. Abigail's response was measured and direct. If she left, who would heal the people she'd been healing? Who would save the children dying from fever? Who would stop the bleeding when women gave birth? Would these men do it? Would Reverend Marsh put down his Bible and set broken bones? Would Sheriff Cutler use his gun to cure dysentery? The Klansmen said that wasn't their concern. Black people had survived before she came along, and they'd survive after she was gone. What mattered was that a Negro girl couldn't have this kind of power, couldn't show this kind of ability, couldn't prove that white supremacy was a lie built on the suppression of black knowledge and skill. Then something happened that no one could explain, least of all Abigail herself. One of the Klansmen suddenly cried out, clutching his chest. His rifle fell from his hands. He tried to speak but couldn't pull air into his lungs. He dropped to his knees, gasping like a fish yanked from water. Then another Klansman cried out, dropping his torch, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Then a third collapsed entirely, his body seizing. The big Klansman demanded to know what Abigail was doing to them. She answered honestly, nothing. She was standing there talking. She hadn't touched anyone. She hadn't given them anything. She'd simply stood her ground and refused to be intimidated. But perhaps, she suggested, there were powers in this world that didn't appreciate men hiding their faces and threatening girls in the night. Perhaps their own guilt was manifesting physically. Perhaps the universe itself had opinions about injustice, and sometimes expressed those opinions in ways that looked like intervention. 4 of the 6 Klansmen were now on the ground, writhing or unconscious. The remaining 2, including the big one, backed away slowly, terror replacing their earlier confidence. The big man whispered that she was a witch, saying it like an accusation and a revelation. Abigail neither confirmed nor denied it. She simply told them to get off her property, take their friends and deliver a message. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't hiding. And the next time someone came here meaning harm, they might not leave at all. The two standing clansmen grabbed their fallen companions and dragged them away, disappearing into the darkness like ghosts fleeing dawn. Abigail watched until she couldn't see their torches anymore. Then she went back inside, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. What had just happened? She didn't know. She hadn't consciously done anything to those men. She hadn't poisoned them or cast a spell or used any technique Mama Zena had taught her. But they'd fallen anyway, struck down by something invisible and undeniable. Mama Zena had warned her about moments like this, times when the gift manifested in ways beyond conscious control, times when belief and fear and something older than both combined to create effects that looked like magic because nobody had better words for them. Times when the boundary between physical and spiritual became thin enough that intention alone could shape reality. It happened sometimes among people with the gift. Slaves who'd cursed their masters and watched those masters fall ill with no apparent cause. Root workers who'd protected their communities through means that couldn't be explained or replicated. Healers whose presence alone seemed to determine who lived and died. The gift was real, but it operated according to rules that Western science didn't acknowledge and couldn't measure. Abigail didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching for more visitors, but none came. By dawn, she knew the story would spread. The clan had tried to drive her out and failed. Men had fallen at her feet without her touching them. The legend would grow, and with it, both her protection and her danger. She was right. By noon the next day, every black person within 20 miles had heard some version of what happened. The details got exaggerated with each telling, as stories do. Some said she'd killed all 6 clansmen. Others claimed she'd turned them into animals. A few swore she'd made them vanish entirely. The truth was strange enough without embellishment, but people added to it anyway, because sometimes legends protect better than facts. A witch who could strike men down with a look was more useful than a girl who'd gotten lucky. The white community heard different versions, equally distorted. Sheriff Cutler received reports that Abigail had attacked 6 upstanding citizens with dark magic. Reverend Marsh heard she'd summoned demons. Edmund Hartwell heard she'd cursed half the county. None of them knew exactly what to do with a problem that resisted both legal authority and physical intimidation. You couldn't arrest someone for being frightening. You couldn't hang someone for making men fall down without touching them. For 2 weeks, an uneasy standoff held. Abigail continued her work, treating people who came to her in increasing numbers. The failed clan raid had paradoxically boosted her credibility. If she could protect herself from armed white men, surely she could protect those who sought her help. The white establishment kept plotting, searching for a way to eliminate her that wouldn't make them look weak or frightened, or unable to control their own county. And the black community watched anxiously, knowing that whatever happened to Abigail would affect them all. She'd become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. Her survival meant hope was possible. Her destruction would prove that hope was foolish. The breaking point came from an unexpected source. Thomas Greaves, the old man Abigail had saved from dysentery, made a mistake born of gratitude and relief. He'd been so happy to be alive, so grateful for his healing, that he talked about it openly. He praised Abigail's skill while working in Edmund Hartwell's cotton field, within earshot of Hartwell's overseer. He called her blessed by God, said she had powers beyond human understanding, suggested that maybe black people had knowledge white people didn't possess. The overseer reported it to Hartwell immediately. Hartwell saw an opportunity. Public testimony from a black man about Abigail's powers could be used as evidence. And if that black man had been healed through witchcraft, well, that made him a victim instead of a supporter. It gave them the legal hook they needed. On May 29, 1871, Edmund Hartwell filed formal charges against Abigail Collins with the Wilkinson County Court. The charges were deliberately vague, but legally sufficient: practicing medicine without a license, engaging in witchcraft, inciting unrest among the Negro population, and making terroristic threats against white citizens. The penalty, if convicted, could range anywhere from a fine she couldn't possibly pay to hanging. The vagueness was intentional. It gave Judge William Morrison flexibility to determine the sentence based on political considerations rather than legal precedent. A warrant was issued. Sheriff Cutler was ordered to arrest Abigail and bring her before Judge Morrison for trial. This time Cutler brought 8 men, all deputies, all armed with both rifles and determination. This time he came during daylight, when there'd be witnesses to everything that happened, and no room for mysterious events that people could later question or distort. They found Abigail working in her garden, pulling weeds from around her medicinal plants. She saw them coming and stood slowly, dirt on her hands, facing them with the same calm she'd shown the Klansmen. She knew what this meant: arrest, trial, almost certain conviction, possibly death. Cutler delivered his message formally. She was under arrest. She could remain silent or speak, her choice. But she was coming with them to stand trial. The charges would be read in court. She'd have an opportunity to defend herself, though they both knew that was theater. The outcome was predetermined. Abigail asked what charges justified 8 armed men to arrest 1 unarmed girl. Cutler said she'd find out soon enough. She could walk peacefully or be dragged, but she was leaving her shack either way. The time for warnings had passed. Now came consequences. She considered her options quickly. She could run. The swamp was close. She knew paths they didn't. But running would confirm guilt in everyone's eyes. It would make her a fugitive. It would mean abandoning everyone who depended on her. And it would prove that white authority could still control black people through fear. So she agreed to come, but with a simple statement that needed to be said and witnessed. She hadn't done anything wrong, and Cutler knew it. Everyone there knew it. She'd healed people. She'd saved lives. That was her only crime. And if they wanted to hang her for it, they'd have to live with what that said about them. They bound her hands. Unnecessary and deliberately humiliating. They walked her through the main road of Woodville, making sure people saw her captured. Making sure everyone understood that black power, no matter how real or beneficial, would not be tolerated. Black people watched from doorways and windows, their faces showing anguish and fear and helpless rage. White people gathered on porches, some looking satisfied, others uncertain, a few clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. And Abigail walked between them all, her head high, her dignity intact despite the ropes, showing everyone that you could bind someone's hands without binding their spirit. They locked her in a cell in the courthouse basement, a small space with a dirt floor and no windows. The trial was scheduled for June 5th, 1 week away. 7 days to sit in darkness while her enemies built a case designed to destroy her. 7 days for fear to work its way into her bones and make her small and apologetic and willing to accept whatever mercy they offered. But Abigail wasn't alone, even in that cell. Word of her arrest spread immediately through the black community. People began gathering money for a lawyer, though finding one willing to defend a black woman against witchcraft charges in Mississippi in 1871 would be nearly impossible. Others brought food, bribing guards to pass it to her. And every night, groups of black people gathered outside the courthouse, singing spirituals, praying, maintaining a vigil that said even if the Lord didn't protect Abigail, her community wouldn't abandon her. Inside her cell, Abigail sat in darkness and considered her situation with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who'd always known this moment would come. The trial was a formality. Judge Morrison would find her guilty, because that's what men like Hartwell and Marsh expected, and Morrison owed his position to men like them. The only real question was the sentence. If they just wanted her gone, they might offer exile, banishment from Mississippi with the threat of death if she returned. If they wanted to make an example, to send a message to every black person in the county that certain lines must not be crossed, they'd hang her in the town square. She thought about everything Mama Zena had taught her, about knowledge passed down through generations of enslaved people, kept alive when everything else was stolen, about the power that came from understanding the body, the earth, the connection between physical and spiritual, about the responsibility that came with possessing that power. Mama Zena had said something near the end of her life that Abigail remembered now. Don't waste the gift on people who'd sooner see you dead than admit you're right. But don't hoard it either. Power that's kept hidden might as well not exist. You use it when it matters. Consequences be damned. You use it to help your people. And if they kill you for it, well, at least you'll die having made a difference. Abigail had used her gift. She'd saved lives. She'd stood up to authority. She'd refused to be small and quiet and invisible. And now she'd pay whatever price that required, unless something changed, unless the universe had other plans. On the 5th night of her imprisonment, a guard came to her cell around midnight, carrying a lantern that pushed back the absolute darkness. He was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and hands that shook slightly as he unlocked the door. He whispered that she had a visitor, someone who'd paid good money for 10 minutes of privacy, but they couldn't get her out. If he opened that cell and she escaped, his life was over. Abigail said she understood. Then Sheriff James Cutler stepped into the light, and everything shifted again. Seekers Part 2. Parsika Cutler stood in the dim glow of her cell, looking older than he had during their first confrontation. The confidence that usually armored him had worn thin. Deep circles shadowed his eyes. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something heavier than the badge pinned to his chest. He got straight to the point. His son was dying. The malaria had come back worse, just as Abigail had predicted. The fever spiked higher each time. The boy couldn't keep food down. The doctor had stopped coming, said there was nothing more to be done except pray and prepare. But Cutler didn't believe in prayer anymore, not after watching his 9-year-old son waste away while God stayed silent. He needed her help. He was willing to make a deal. Abigail listened without interrupting. This was the moment she'd predicted. The inevitable conclusion when white supremacy collided with the reality of a sick child. Ideology meant nothing when your son was dying. Pride became negotiable. Even racial hatred could be temporarily suspended when death came knocking. Cutler explained his offer carefully. He couldn't free her. Too many people were watching. If she simply disappeared, there would be questions, accusations, possibly riots. The white establishment needed their trial, needed their moment of public dominance. But he could influence the outcome. Judge Morrison owed him favors accumulated over years of cooperation. He could convince Morrison to sentence her to exile instead of hanging. She'd be escorted to the county line, released with a warning never to return to Mississippi. But she'd be alive. All she had to do was save his son first. Abigail considered the proposal in silence. Exile meant losing everything: her home, her community, everyone she'd been helping. It meant starting over with nothing in a place where she knew no one and her reputation couldn't protect her. But it was better than hanging. Better than giving white Mississippi the satisfaction of killing her publicly, making her death a warning to every other black person who dared challenge the established order, and refusing to help a dying child violated everything Mama Zena had taught her. The gift wasn't conditional. It didn't depend on whether someone deserved healing or whether their family had treated you justly. You helped because you could, because the alternative was letting someone die when you possessed the knowledge to save them. She agreed. The guard let her out through a back entrance, moving quietly through Woodville's empty streets while the town slept. Cutler's house stood on the edge of town, a modest two-story structure that spoke of middle-class comfort without excessive wealth. They entered through the kitchen door, where Margaret Cutler was waiting, exhausted and desperate. When she saw Abigail, Margaret's face showed confusion and fear and hope, all mixed together. Her husband was bringing a black girl, accused of witchcraft, into their home to treat their son. It violated everything she'd been taught about proper society. But her son was dying, and proper society hadn't saved him. She led Abigail upstairs without speaking. The boy lay in a bed soaked with sweat despite the cool night air. He was small for 9 years old, thin and pale, his breathing shallow and labored. The fever radiated off him in waves. His eyes were closed, but moving rapidly beneath the lids, trapped in fever dreams that were probably worse than his waking reality. Abigail removed the ropes from her wrists, needing full mobility to work. She approached the bed and placed her palm on the boy's forehead, feeling not just temperature, but something deeper: the rhythm of his blood, the pattern of his breathing, the way his body was fighting a battle it was slowly losing. She confirmed what she'd told Cutler weeks earlier: advanced malaria. The parasite had established itself in his blood, multiplying with each cycle, destroying red blood cells faster than his body could replace them. Left untreated, he had maybe 2 weeks before organ failure. But it was treatable, if you knew what to use and how to use it. From the cloth bundle she'd been allowed to bring, Abigail removed packets of dried herbs she'd prepared months ago. Cinchona bark, the source of quinine, gathered from a